Eric was going to be here, but we shall see. He actually had a nice call yesterday with somebody who might be bringing back to life a island exhibit that we've been on early on last year that they're looking to potentially move forward with. So that's awesome. Before some of you guys got on, I was telling Rob and Dan and Tom. Edie had a funny comment this morning. She's like, "You got this job for this booth," and she said, "And they're having me ship it to the advanced warehouse. Is there a show coming up?" It's like, yes. Um, so before we kind of get started into the topics, a couple quick things. One I alluded to in the email, but also wanted to tap Rob real quick. Before we jump into the CES thing, Rob, if you could briefly give us a quick update on kind of the advocacy things that are going on and some things we've seen, because with the change of the administration, we're in an interesting time.
We sure are. So, um, as you can imagine, when with a shift in the administration, it's sort of like a clean slate. You start all over again now. So even though there were all these other programs hanging around from the last congressional session, it's as if they all disappear and either they have to get resurrected or new pieces are introduced. And obviously, President Biden has his own agenda that he's trying to get in there now and get acted upon, which looks like he'll try to push through with primarily just Democratic support and not worry about bipartisan support. It seems like there'll be some changes as to who's going to get individual stimulus. Maybe they lower the threshold of personal income and make that the point at 75,000 rather than the $95,000 annual income threshold. But we'll see how that all plays out. On the industry side, Go Live Together has morphed its advocacy efforts into a new alliance called the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. Just what we needed, another acronym, ECA, for us all to figure out. But what this group's really doing is it's focusing more on the long term. They're in the process now of hiring a vice president of government affairs to reside in DC. That is a extremely highly paid individual who has deep contacts in Congress and can pick up a phone call and get a meeting. So what that group's going to work on is taking on the larger issues: insurance for canceled shows, business protection liability insurance, raising or creating, depending how you look at it, the stature of our industry in the political world so that the trade shows and meetings industries is actually will become a recognized industry if all goes well. With that happening, the EDPA continues to financially and through personnel support the efforts of the ECA, but feels that there are other issues that need to be worked on for its members. So it continues to work with Cassidy and Associates, which is a lobbying group that they started working with last year, successfully worked on PPP1, changing language in the forgiveness provision, then PPP2, which hopefully most of the folks on this call have gotten their applications in for, and hopefully maybe even been approved and awaiting, if not received, deposits in their banks already. The EDPA is also working on getting the industry recognized as one of the hardest hit industries. We hear that phrase talked about a lot, but we're taking the mantra, first to close, last to reopen. If you don't have any revenue, wouldn't you consider that the hardest hit industry? And the reason for that is if that recognition can come about, we're hoping that we'll be able to get the shuttered venues program expanded to include companies within our industry, which would then allow them to apply for grants under that program. Right now, there's still remaining about $13 billion available in that program that's untapped. So that's the hope there. While all that's going on, one of my sluggish colleagues, Kevin Carty, and I have decided that one day this will all wind down. I don't know if it ever ends, but wind down. We will be back to doing business, and manufacturers and importers are going to be looking at the tariff issue again. So we have ventured off under the auspices of the EDPA with Dasher and Chris Griffin's blessing. And we've made contacts with the American Can Association. That's not a toilet association, Tom. I knew where your mind was going there. That's about the aluminum industry. And we've connected and joined the Americans for Free Trade, which is an organization that believes that the Chinese should be under some regulation, but that tariffs only harm small American businesses who are paying the tariffs, not Chinese companies. And Kevin and I were recently interviewed by their press group, and an editorial has been written off of that they're working on getting placed as to how tariffs hurt small businesses and harm the opportunity for jobs to be created in America. So the focus isn't just on the pandemic when it comes to advocacy, but also that we will be moving forward and we need to address those issues. So I'll shut up so we can get to some more interesting topics.
I'll share with you guys an inside story that I find fascinating by going through this process, is specifically on the tariffs. Is there's two associations on the aluminum side that I've been communicating with, and as Rob said, one of them is the Can Manufacturers Association, and I had a sidebar conversation with their head governmental affairs person, and it's like, well, we're kind of in a pickle. So what's the pickle? Well, the tariff program didn't really work, but he goes, imagine we have 100 members. He says 99 of them are all for, let's figure out how to get these tariffs away, keep China in line, but, don't tariff our partner countries, and, all of that. He said, but then we have one holdout who loves the tariffs and won't do anything about it. And oh, by the way, they happen to be the largest contributor to the association. It's called U.S. Steel. It's like, oh man, my God, I don't know what you do with that. He's like, yeah, we haven't figured it out. So it's been interesting, kind of learning how some of that works or doesn't work, I guess.
And one of the reasons we jumped on the back of Americans for Free Trade is it's a bunch of behemoths like the National Retail Association, and we're jumping in and we're giving them the voice of the little guy, and they're all excited to tell the sob story of the little guy and how they're getting beat up. So we'll see if that helps. And at the same time, we don't have to expend a lot of money to fight that fight.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks, Rob. And then, sort of as promised on the last call, wanted to give a brief update on follow-up, rather, because we were right in the middle of CES at that point, and as both Greg and I shared, we were both attending the event, and wanted to give a little bit of feedback, impression, timely in the sense that as Greg shared with me this morning, and I had done mine, I think last week, was they just sent their survey requests out, and I don't think either one of us gave glowing answers, but Greg, I'll let you start. Why don't you give a sort of a nickel tour of what your thoughts were?
Yeah, I mean, I think I might have mentioned this last time we got together. I was enthusiastic to see what this was going to be about. Obviously CES is a big event that I think most of us has some familiarity with, but also, they waited pretty late in the game to kind of get public about what they were doing. And then once they announced, they made this big splash that they were partnering with Microsoft on the production of the event. The vehicle itself and the the platform and the production and that type of thing. And Microsoft is certainly leading the way when it comes to digital, online, virtual events. And oh, by the way, it dovetails nicely into what they do. What their product is evidenced by, we're all on Microsoft Teams here. So in addition to kind of wanting to see how the event was going to go, we also had a couple of clients that were sponsors of the event. And so even though it was a pretty sizable investment, to sponsor the event really meant to buy ad time or commercial time where, you could kind of position your company and your message as, thought leader or, whatever splash you kind of wanted to make. And it could be, in the $75,000 to $150,000 range to do a sponsorship like that. Now, that's a fraction of what our customers are used to spending at CES, where we've rented an entire restaurant along Restaurant Row, ripped it out, retrofitted it, had bands and all kinds of stuff. So, I think our clients kind of looked at it from the investment cost is pretty low. So, two comments. One, on those kind of paid ad or paid sponsorships, I was pretty disappointed. I logged in and I was kind of surprised at just the lack of production quality that was put in. It felt very much like another webinar that we've sat in on, kind of the dual screen with maybe a PowerPoint presentation next to it. And I'm talking big brands, so, our engagement was, for the money, it was okay. But when you really looked at the ROI on, the number of eyeballs that were looking at the screen and what you spent, I would call that disappointing. My other comment would be just on kind of the exhibitor ecosystem, right? Which was, frankly, again, I was really disappointed. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was basically an alphabetized list of exhibitors. It looked very much like the exhibitor list on a show site, only when you clicked on the exhibitor, you went to a microsite that allowed you to watch a video on demand, download a white paper. In a few cases, you could leave the environment and go into a kind of virtual exhibit environment, and several of those were well done. Or kind of chat with a salesperson in kind of this chat functionality. This is not dissimilar from what Freeman's doing and, other kind of major event platforms. So I kind of walked away and thinking, that's it. Like, that's what CES is. And so I guess on the one hand, pretty disappointing. On the other hand, probably pretty optimistic for kind of the future of in-person engagement. I walked away going, and I said this in my survey, I wouldn't be coming back to that experience, even though it was only a couple $100 to attend. Like, it needs to get back in person, at least in that third-party trade show type of an environment. So that was my takeaway there. One last comment, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dreamforce. It's Salesforce's hosted giant extravaganza. That was also really disappointing, just from a production quality, engagement, sponsorship. So, final statement, I don't think I've seen anything that would lead me to believe that we're on the verge of replacing the elements of the in-person experience that are really why people attend events. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is on the exhibitor side. I echo everything Greg said, but on the exhibitor side, going through that alphabetized list, I wanted to be really intentional about going through, picking out several companies and adding them to my show, and go through the process, you know. So I didn't just skirt it. And then the other part of it was I wanted to engage with exhibitors, and I was upfront with them as well, and you know why I was engaging. I wanted to hear how their experience was, what was the traffic flow like. Out of what ended up being about 23 companies that I engaged with on that level, um, one little glitchy part that it could have been totally on the exhibitor, so I won't put this necessarily on CES, but with several of them in the chat function, which was sort of your instant touch to be able to communicate with them. They were on, it was more of a send a message and then they'd get back to you later. Some of them were later in the evening, some of them were the next day. It was, not a whole lot of instant engagement there. But the general feedback is I told people I want to write about this. I'm going to share this with industry folks in a blog form at some point after a post show. It really wasn't great, and it goes back to, I may have said this because I think that we were in day one when we had our last call here. It to me it just broadened the divide between sort of the haves and have-nots as it relates to an event, because on that alphabetized list, and I mean the Greg's clients that he's talking about, they probably weren't even the top spenders by any stretch, but but still spent a whole bunch of money. But the majority of the folks in that list, they're not ponying up $75,000 for sponsorship. And so, but unless you really hit those sort of dollar price points, you didn't really have the ability to present in a meaningful way, have your content visible to multiple people without them, finding it. So it fell pretty flat, and the feedback in general was not good live as I was talking to people. And like Greg, I did the response afterwards, and that was sort of my takeaway was, I can't wait to be on the floor for the show, but I would not have attended in that fashion again if they were to do it in 2022 as a virtual for some reason. So
even the press was pretty,
they were pretty brutal, yeah.
Critical of it, so.
Well, let's move into our topics. First topic, which is an interesting one, and one I've been looking forward to hearing from you guys on. What was the turning point in your career or business? We're looking for an event or series of events that really put you on the path to success, kind of tying into your backstory. So does anyone want to volunteer to go first before I pick? All right, Mr. Burkhart.
Yes, it was not a good experience as I look back on it. It was early in my time at Aurora. It was probably early 2002. Joan had one massive client, pharmaceuticals, that kind of our world revolved around at the time. And looking back, some of our smaller partners were neglected for the good of the behemoth, a good word that I had heard early in our conversation. And we found out in a very odd way that we were losing them. And I remember at that point in time, I was just starting to sell, but mainly took care of the warehouse. And I remember two 53-foot trailers coming from a competitor coming over to the warehouse and watching and assisting in loading up those two trucks and watching our largest client, they had outgrown us, um, leave. And we spent some time uh, pretty depressed over it, wondering what had happened, knowing what had happened, but in denial. And the great thing eventually that came out of that was learning that not having too many eggs in one basket, how that can affect your future and the way that you do business. And ended up helping us flourish with many other partners and gave us more time to engage and not have to worry about all of our business success tied to one client. So that was probably the biggest thing in my eyes of my 20 years here at Aurora.
Well, nice. I remember, it makes me think there was, I won't name names, but there was a company, uh, not, within a state's reach of you that I remember while we were all kind of thriving over the course of the last, several years, their entire business went away because one client left. And it was a established business, and one client left, and that entire business went away, which just shows how fragile, how reliant you are. You don't want to be that reliant on certainly on one client.
Absolutely. And I think within the last year or two, it was very sad that we found out that the local competitor that had gotten their business was replaced, I think, by GES or Freeman on a national level. And I hate to see any local group lose like that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, how about you? It's a turning point for you, professionally or personally?
Yeah, I kind of took the question as like how you got into this industry.
That's fine.
And maybe I'm kind of a odd one because I grew up in it. I hear a lot of people's stories because I'm always interested in how they got to this spot, and it's always this random path, like most most career paths. But I remember cleaning nomadic in stands in high school. So I guess that's kind of weird to grow up in it. And I don't know, the turning point. I went to school for music, and that didn't seem like a very smart career path. I was also interested in business, so I kind of pivoted. I hate that word to a business degree, and I took that on, and then kind of applied what I already knew. And this is a very creative field, and keeps you on your toes, and I really like it. And maybe I'll do 30 years more of it. Maybe I'll do something else. I don't know, but I've liked it so far. So
Nice.
I don't know. That's it.
Nice. Thank you. Mr. Ted, how about you?
Well, I was thinking there was a lot of different points which got me to where I am today. But I think the biggest one with regards to my professional career and personally coming together was at the time I was with Skyline Exhibits there for a number of years. In fact, I think it's the first time I met Greg. I'd worked for Rick Klimek, and I'd learned a lot about selling. In fact, so much so that I took over the general manager position and helped train staff both there locally in St. Louis and in Cleveland and a few other little locations we had around. And I grew up in a small town. My father was an entrepreneur, and all of his business came through referrals. So I think I came to a point, an apex, if you will, where I found I was training folks during the day to make 50 phone calls a day, X number to close each number of sales they wanted to make their goals. And yet I was reading all the different sales techniques that were involved around, no cold calling, referral. So I think when I finally made the jump from working from somebody and starting my own exhibit business, I knew that referrals was going to be the way that I drive the best type of clients to me. The type of clients that you need in this industry, which really is, you're not selling a commodity, you're selling a service. More than selling the service, you're selling an insurance policy that you're able to deliver on their needs time and time again. And that's why they pay us and why they pay us well. So I think making that jump to go as referral only business 18 years later still pays off. I don't pick up the phone to make any calls. That may change in the months to come. But still to date, I have all the clients I've ever started with, unless the company dissolved or went away through acquisition. Most of the time, my company has grown when we've had poor economies. 9/11, my company grew. 2008, whenever the economy crashed, people went to a lot of different places, and my business doubled. So I think leaning on what I knew growing up, trusting the fact that if you provide a impeccable service time and time again in a niche market and do it in a way that makes your clients successful first, that you'll have a successful career. And well, to date, we're still creating new products in the middle of the pandemic and moving forward and trying to grow the business. So I think that was my success point that really changed my direction, and that was a personal plunge too. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Nice. Yeah, the dialing for dollars versus referral is always a great storyline, and definitely a lesson learned. I think, at least in our industry, haven't run across a single person who at some point wasn't like, you know what, people want to work with me. They don't necessarily want to work because I called them this many times and I made the most calls. It's definitely a relationship game.
Yeah, 18 years later, it's still paying off. So
Nice.
I appreciate it.
Nice. Rob, how about you? You've been doing this for 95 years.
I've been at this for 26 years now, and got into it because of wanting to leave the practice of law and answering a classified ad in the Wall Street Journal to buy a company. So, as odd as that was, I think that the most impactful moment, there are two that always stand out, was one, the first trade show I ever exhibited at, and Jill Brookman from the old Exhibit Builder magazine took me by the hand and walked me around, introduced me to people so that I knew other people in the industry. And that always has had an impact on me to make sure that I reach out to people in the industry, and it is all about networking and relationships. Piggybacking on that, I remember my first EDPA national conference, and Gene Winther was the outgoing president of the EDPA. And the EDPA at the time had a pretty serious reputation for being an old boys network. And Gene literally took me by the arm and walked me around the room and introduced me to people to make sure I didn't feel like an outsider. And again, reinforcing the importance of all that. Probably the funniest thing in terms of learning about the industry, though, came at a TS2 event one year, and I was there alone. This was pre-merger. The original company I had was called Exhibit Specialty Products, that made a 300-watt halogen wall washer, also affectionately referred to as the egg fryer. And when we bought the company, there was a new product in development, which was a 200-watt fixture. And literally, I got the prototypes in. We were in Philadelphia. I'll never forget it. And I hang them up on the booth, and I plug them in, and smoke starts billowing out of the fixtures. Right? So I unplug the lights. Right, I grab them. I'm like making sure there's no fire marshal around looking. And I go back to my hotel room and I call the contract manufacturer, and we're figuring out that in the reflector inside the light, there was a film, and the film was never peeled off and when they made the prototypes. So this was burning. So I said, well, what am I going to do? He shows up and he goes, you just got to slowly plug them in and unplug them and let it burn off. So I disconnected the smoke detectors in my hotel room, and I'm sitting in the bathroom. I put the lid down on the toilet, plugging the lights in and unplugging them until we burned off all the film. And then the next morning, went on the show floor at 7 a.m. to hang the lights back up and get going. And that's when I knew I became an industry veteran. So
That's awesome.
uh,
That's awesome.
uh,
Gwen, how about you? Oh,
Can you hear me?
there you are.
Okay. Um, Gosh, all these stories make me just chuckle because I'm like, boy, if that means the turning point, I got a few. No, you know what? I think for us as a company and for me personally as well was the year that we won Buyer's Choice Award when we launched the event suite side of thing that was more targeted for the client end. And, you know, it came like it just at that show in the middle of exhibitor when you have clients bringing their exhibit house companies to your booth and saying, or bringing their business cards because they were too busy to come over and saying, hey, I want this. You need to go talk to them. That was like the, okay, this is how we should be marketing at this show. You know, it was literally just that broad because we had always started with the exhibit house. So that was a good thing. And then kind of going off with Rob, I can remember, you know, me and my friend Melanie would build those booths. And I can remember one year at exhibitor, her hair caught on fire with one of the rocket lights. And we're like, you know, up there, she's on top of a ladder, we're screaming, you know, put the fire out. And it was just a smoking. But many a times like that. So if that's a veteran, I'm definitely in. So, yeah, sucker.
Let's see, Gina.
So I think it occurred over a period of time. You know how like when you first start out in your professional career and you want to say exactly the right things, you don't want to mess up, you don't want to put your foot in your mouth type of thing. So I think the turning point for me was probably about maybe 14 years ago, where you're comfortable in your own skin, right? And you can mess up and you can potentially say the wrong things, but you can laugh about it. And you really do, you know, build that relationship with the client. You know, to Ted's point, really relationship selling versus, you know, how many calls can you get in a day. I came from that early on in my career as well. So so I think it is just being yourself. And once you're in that position, I think you can be extremely successful. So
Gina, how did you get in? I've never asked you this. I know how you got to Optima, but prior to that with EDC, how did you get into this industry?
So I actually had a friend that I worked with in the staffing and recruitment industry. And so we were both in sales, and we placed people in marketing, advertising, graphic design, web design positions. So was I prior to that I worked for a printing company actually in Grand Rapids. So then moved into the recruitment area of sales, and she knew the owner of EDC and had mentioned that he was looking for a salesperson. So that's how I got into the industry. And of course, like all of us, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? There's an industry around this, you know? So, and yeah, and left for a little while, but it sucked me back in. So
That's cool. Rob, or not Rob, Tom, sorry.
Okay. It was in 1994. I got recruited to be sales manager at a logistics company called Champion Transportation at that time, and it was a turning point because the ownership had the vision and the foresight to recognize the need to get into the trade show side of the transportation industry, and had the willingness to back up what we needed to do, create systems and processes. And I was always also very lucky to have a mentor, a gentleman named Dave Harmon, who was our show site ops rep. And this guy, he made me learn about the industry. I mean, terminologies, and he took time to sit down and explain all the different aspects of the industry, you know, the roles of the general service contractor, show management, associations, manufacturers like Classic, you know, end users, everybody. And so going in, I had no idea the extent of the industry, but we learned really quickly. And with the backing, we were able to really put together a great group and expanded it. You know, I mean, the business just grew exponentially. But secondarily, it really took off once I got involved in EDPA. I remember sitting in a bar in Minneapolis, meeting Rob Cohen and Marco Alvarez for the first time in an upper Midwest chapter meeting. And I remember going to my first EDPA national meeting, not knowing anybody. I had the same experience as Rob, Glenn, everybody, you know, when you go and that was kind of a secondary turn moment for me that turned things around. And so it was just being in the right place, right time, a couple different times really meant a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I think back to the people you meet along the way, and like many of you, I came into this a long time ago, '94, and there's many turning points, but the collective one that I kind of find myself grabbing onto is the people like Jocelyn Wells, Jay Burkett. If you guys know Jay, Jay's a great example of, he's a competitor. So I'll use him. He's a competitor, but for whatever reason, at the time he was with Expo Systems out of Florida before Expo Display bought them, or Diamond Display bought them, and they did their thing. Anyways, he took it upon himself, because I truly was a kid in the industry, and he took it upon himself to introduce himself. That was huge. This was at Bally's, at an exhibitor show in Bally's, and walked me around the show floor and introduced me to people. And I didn't know him from Adam. I was just, you know, and then a lot of those people that he introduced me to, then they kind of come in under their wing, introduce me to different people. And then, you know, at some point this isn't an EDPA commercial by any stretch, but whether it was through EDPA or even through the old TSEA and that association, you know, you're introduced to people who are like, hey, we would like you to come in and be a part of this group. And then, you know, like Rob shared, I remember my very first EDPA, and there was multiple people that were like, hey, I want to introduce you to somebody. And this sounds corny to say now, but there were people in that room that I looked at from afar as industry leaders, like, well, I'm not going to be able to talk to that person, you know, but was given the opportunity to have meaningful conversations with them right there. But I go all the way back, honestly, to the late 90s. I think the first show was like 97 that I went to, and that was a real, like, as far as just, you know, personal growth for me in the industry, that was a big point, you know, meeting a lot of those early mentors, and then thankfully being able to work with many of them still to this day. Katina, heard from you.
Me? Okay. Well, the first thing that kind of popped into my head when you talked about a turning point was sort of a random experience that I don't talk about that much. I mean, I've talked a lot to different groups about, you know, I chose to be in this industry kind of unlike most people. I did a lot of research and figured out what I wanted to do, and then I went and got a master's degree to do it, and then I'm doing it. So like, it was a very purposeful trajectory. But what I was just thinking of sharing is a time at one of my jobs since I got into the industry where I had a certain perception in my head of, you know, I was part of this team. We were creating such great things together, and I just really bought into the vision of the owners of the company. And there was just this one point where there's some multiple factors that happened, but there was this one point where the owner kind of came to me and basically asked me like if I was, if I was working on something, or just acted like I had totally dropped the ball when I hadn't, and made it seem like I was almost like a detriment to the company, or I was somehow taking advantage of the company, as opposed to what I felt like I was, which was a team player, someone who was helping to build this thing and was part of it. And, the company's success was my success. And so that interaction with that, person in our industry, just that one time, all of a sudden I completely shifted my view about the job that I was in. And, I just had to decide where I could go that I would be able to be in alignment, I guess, have my values in alignment with the company that I was at. So that was a really big lesson for me, and kind of different, just a sort of a different take, a different story.
No, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. I see Kristen is on there. I don't know if you're just listening. Are you tuned in? Would you like to share or move on to the next question?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I logged in on my work computer, and it's a desktop, so it doesn't have a camera.
Oh, no problem.
But I guess for me, my turning point, or my most recent turning point, was moving to Illinois. I'm kind of weird in that, like, I've been around trade shows for a long time, but I'm new to the exhibit side of it. So I've been doing this fan convention out in Boston. It's an anime convention. I've been staffing that since 2006, and I kind of worked my way up the ranks over there so that I was at like a board level position. It's been about 10 years now. But professionally, I had been working mostly at like laser tag places or trampoline parks. Like, I was a manager for those type of places. So when I moved out here to Illinois to be with my husband, it was like, I was kind of like, well, I've been doing trade show stuff for so long. I wonder if I can find a job working in the industry. And after a couple months of looking, I found Nichols, and I've been here for about almost 5 years. So it's been pretty exciting to learn another side of things and getting to know new people.
Nice. Are you able to still engage in that anime event, or is that gone now since you've moved?
I still do it. I had some I guess legal responsibilities that I had to step out of when I moved, but I'm still the convention chair, and before COVID, I was flying out there about once a month to do staff meetings, and
Wow.
it was an excuse to visit my family, but it's been about a year since I've been out there now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on. We've got a few minutes left here. Let's move on to topic 2, which is just aptly titled February Free-for-All. Anything anyone's got on their mind that they want to bring up? Questions, thoughts, anything that you guys thought of over the last few days that you wanted to bring to the table? Tom, I know we had one question offline with Dick, who couldn't be here, but so why don't we start with that?
Was it the question about the smaller shows, Kevin?
No, it was about the prediction. Like, I'll ask you. It was just sort of by a show of hands. Like, if let's break it up in quarters, maybe. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, or we'll give a fifth option and say 2022. Realistically, as you sit at your desks today, who thinks that that live events are going to come back in the first quarter? That's what I thought. How about second quarter? A little bit in second quarter, Gwen? A little bit? Okay. How about third quarter? You know, I qualify that by saying I don't know necessarily. That's when most people answer, but you know, I don't know necessarily what they're going to look like. But it sure seems like we've got a hefty schedule in the third quarter. And how about fourth quarter? Yeah, fourth quarter. And then nothing really meaningful. We'll call it that until 22. Okay.
I don't know. I think there's going to be meaningful shows in the fourth quarter. There has to be because of the show schedules and what's been rescheduled. Like at McCormick Place, they've got a extremely full schedule, and I'm assuming that would include something like RSNA, which is going to be a big show. Has always been a big show, so we can hope. But you know, you almost have to take it, you know, that question with an asterisk, because if restaurant show goes off in May, that's second quarter, and that's a large show. And as of right now, it's still on the books, and people are planning on it. So it's just so so foggy, you know, about when it's all going to start.
As somebody here in Texas, we have 2 events we're going either to exhibit at and or walk the show floor next month. One in Dallas and one in San Antonio. So as far as the activity from our clients, since, you know, the companies we work with are in this industry, it has gone up, and you're going to love this response, 200% as of January in comparison to the pandemic months of last year.
Wow.
So the activity is way up. I mean, with the PPP, the second rounds, and technology being included as the utilities and operations, I mean, people are like, yeah, it's like a whole new breath of fresh air, if you will. But we're looking at a lot of events, just simply hybrid. I'm about to sign up for Fab Tech as well. So that's September, slated, you know, Chicago. So a lot of hybrid events happening.
It's interesting what you pointed out about the PPP too, because we've started getting an increase in calls the last 2 weeks here about equipment, you know, interested in buying equipment, you know, people trying to sell us different things. And I've actually had a couple of the folks that have made those phone calls have said, you know, this would qualify as something that you'd be able to put under your PPP forgiveness in those months that you make those payments. So it's actually a sales strategy that people are using right now, assuming that some folks are getting PPP. But
well, for us, I mean, we've been supporting the industry, or really trying to help folks that were in need during all these past months. So, you know, giving people breaks and all this that's, you know, not company policy or within our contracts. So as I'm sure many of you guys have too in those levels. But so it is good to see that people are, I just love the activity, the amount of activity.
yeah, I'll share. I mean, Katina, I'll have you weigh in on this a little bit as well. But I mean, I know from a you know, project standpoint, we're getting more and more inquiries. They seem to be kind of coming in spurts, to be honest with you. I may have had a separate call with Greg earlier today. I may have shared this, that said the exact same thing, which is kind of feels like, you know, you get this like rush of optimism because whether it's Monday, Tuesday, it's like, you know, a bunch of people calling asking, and then all of a sudden Wednesday hits and there's nothing. And you're like, ah, crap. But it's better than 5 days of that, right? But it feels like, you know, working with all of you, we're getting more inquiries. Would you agree to that, Katina?
Yes. Is that ding when I unmute myself?
No, sorry.
What is this? No, yeah, we are definitely getting more inquiries. My department is extremely busy with designs and virtual designs. So we're, you know, trying to stay on top of it, top of everything that we have going on with like still a slightly reduced staff. So, you know, that's part of it, but
And on the traditional designs, that seems like that's kind of been upticking recently, or at least people coming back to. I think I shared, he's not on the call here right now, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but I mean, I got a great reach out from Eric, who's normally in our calls here, and he's got an island that's come back to life that, you know, obviously went out of the way the end of February last year when everything happened, but and they don't even have a show on the books, but they're at least wanting to get that process rolling, which is a good sign. Anything else? Any other topics or any just random question people want to ask? Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about something as a supplier to the industry, just like Optima, just like Classic. You know, we always have to have our pipeline full of new products. And we do, because we didn't launch a bunch of things, because what was the sense of doing that? From the exhibit house standpoint, are you interested in new products coming about, or are you more concerned about holding your breath and figuring out how to ramp up and handle an onslaught of business?
Anyone want to take a stab at that? Okay.
You know, I think right now I'm trying to focus on getting clients to pick up the phones to have conversations still. I will share I plan to share a call I had earlier this week with a client, which may be exciting for everyone. But, you know, I think if anything, it's fun to talk about new products. But right now, again, I think educating clients is kind of important to get the people onto the call. And that's proven to be great. Now, third and fourth quarter, we're looking about doing new things. Rob, certainly having new products to talk about and talking about how the industry changes is always great for conversations. I'd be interested in knowing how, instead of releasing new products, maybe how there could be some price cuts that we could talk clients into buying products that are already existing, and maybe try to offer them discounts, which may be a way to talk about purchasing stuff. But to that point, again, oftentimes we're not talking about an individual product, more of a solution. So those are just my initial thoughts.
Kristen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're also very worried about being able to handle the business when it comes back and the ramp up and all that. But the thing that I'm always getting asked about before, after, even during this is how, like, people are looking for exciting tabletop displays. And I feel like there's only so much I can do, but those would be the types of new products, at least I know I would be interested in seeing.
Yeah. I was going to throw out, I mean, a lot of the sort of joint conversations we've had with end users, with distributors, has been the educational part of it has been huge. You know, they're wanting to know, you know, from us, the perceived experts, you know, what is my show going to look like? You know, what do you recommend if the association's telling me that we should at least prepare for a 50% drop in attendee? So how can we make it most effective? Should we downsize? Should we keep our same footprint? But if we're going to make our same footprint and we're only going to have half the attendees, what are some ways, whether it's through design, whether it's through function, technology, integration, how can we you know, get the most out of that event? That's what at least I'm hearing on a lot of the joint calls. And so to your point, Rob, I think there can be some new products as part of that conversation, definitely. I have had somebody say to me, you know, there's some folks that are not in our group here or even in really the Classic network that have been pushing some new products and kind of doing it on steroids through LinkedIn and some other avenues and email campaigns, where there's some people sitting at their desk going, oh my God, this is, I I just want to, figure out how I can get my clients on a show floor right now. Let's talk maybe in the summer once we know for sure they're going to have some events. And kind of pushing off on that right now. Good question, though. Good question.
And just for food for thought, while we don't like hearing about the big boys all the time, I had a conversation with a inside person at Freeman, and for 2022, they're already budgeting $1 billion in trade show revenue. So,
and Rob, expand on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but again, sort of from some inside conversations there, that budgeting of those sales is not coming along with a massive expansion of their operation. As a matter of fact, they've
shrunk
quite a bit.
So they've closed down some facilities. Their plan is to outsource more and more. For example, and I've shared this with Alex, Gina, they plan on outsourcing 80% of their printing, and they've even sold off printing equipment, and they're going back to their core competencies, and that's where they're going to focus. So it's going to be more partnerships, interesting reliance, be interested to see how much they mark up those services that they outsource from a profitability standpoint, but just the trade show side, that doesn't include AV, that doesn't include their marketing businesses. They're putting the $1 billion number into their budget for 2022. So it's got to make us feel a little good.
Yeah,
there should be some scraps around for us.
Hey, one question before we cut this off. You said you're going to a couple of events. What are those? Early in March? Are they late in March? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Let's see. So we've got two of them. One is actually, both of them are at the end of March. So
cool.
March 28th. I can send you. One is the Tim Hinman dental event. And the other, so we've been looking at dental, we've been looking at, because what we've seen, just FYI, in case you're trying to kind of determine this, obviously healthcare, dental, pet care, education, and not so much food service, but the technology, the like makers of the brands, if you will, of the food distribution. So those are, seemingly consistent companies that we've seen that still have budget and still, they're doing more of the heavier events and that sort. But
there's a big pet show, I think, that's scheduled to go either late spring or early summer, and all signs, I think it may be at, it's one of the big hotels in Vegas, and I think it's planning to go forward.
I'm going to earmark you then, Gwen, for our call the first part of February or first part of April, because I'd love to get feedback on traffic and kind of what, protocols were like and things like that.
Right. And the good news on all of that is that we're requesting saying, hey, can we walk the show floor? So they're letting people, it's a lot easier to get in.
Yeah. And I'm going to dovetail off something you said, education. I have a good friend of mine who makes his businesses, they make flooring for schools. And when I say that, I mean in classrooms. So they refer to them as educational floor, educational carpets and things like that for primary grades mainly. And they have, he's a bit overwhelmed because starting in May, his normal show schedule is doubled of what it would be in traditional years, and they basically just packed as many events in as they can between May and essentially the end of August, prepping and getting ready for the school year next year. So whatever that's worth.
Okay, and I do want to clarify. So the Thomas Henman Dental is expecting 70 exhibitors, and that's their numbers today. They're anticipating 3,000 attendees live. That's actually March 12th in Atlanta.
Okay.
Okay, and then the Health Con is one we're looking at that is in Dallas. That's March 28th. And then in May, the Texas Dental Association is in San Antonio.
Okay. Well, good. Well, we are a little bit over our time, so I want to be respectful of that. But again, thank you. It was awesome to see you all. Good to see faces, hear a little bit about people's backstories more. And I will send the message out in a couple of weeks with information for our workshop. Up until then, see you guys soon.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Bye,
everyone.
Take care.
Take
Have
care.
a good
Everybody.
day.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Tina.
Bye.
Bye, Gwen.